The hunger for electric vehicles is growing, but with huge startup costs, how can the developing world get involved? George, hello and welcome to the studio.
Thank you for having me today.
Now we're looking at something a little bit different, the financing of electric vehicles and also solar systems. Now I understand there's a lot of interest in this area, but also quite a premium for going green. How at Venture South did you decide to begin lending or financing in this area?
Well, we've been interested in this space for quite some time. And the difficulty has been really in finding the proper financial structure and the loan products, and then of course the right partners to work with. So we're fortunate to have found Gervais Motor Corporation, which is based in Boracay, Philippines. And they've required financing for these vehicles, which you see here on the walls behind us. And we've begun financing for both the vehicle and for the company. So the company itself needs working capital to buy the materials and pay their staff, and also the end users, the operator, requires financing. So there's really the two steps. And it took some time to be able to structure it because we can be overexposed with it, so we've had to protect ourselves. And then really to build in the loan methodology. Are they daily payments? Are they weekly repayments? Are they monthly repayments? How do you secure these loans? And we started back in September. Now we've built up a portfolio of over $200,000, and we'll expect that to be growing. And we've been able to really to structure that so that there's real potential to grow that.
Now, it does sound a fabulous place to invest in. The vehicles themselves look great. The fact that there's no pollution, no sound and everything sounds wonderful and perfect for the area itself. But why are banks not lending here if people like yourself are jumping in?
Well, it's a new market. And so it's more difficult for banks really to understand this niche. The end user financing is around $5,000. There's a lot of hands-on work with that. That's a nuisance for many banks. How are you securing those loans? We're securing them through the vehicles themselves and through other deeds of property deeds. But the banks, they're relatively small loans. There's a lot of hands-on work with them. You can be dealing then with hundreds of people. An organization like ourselves, which is really focused on impact finance, really focused on financing for these smaller operators, we're much better suited to it. We're more flexible. We understand these borrowers, and we have much more potential to work with them. The banks, it's really too small to be of interest for them.
Okay, I mean, it does sound interesting that you can have this hands-on approach, watch it grow. You mentioned growth, and it's something you see, certainly developing in future. But which potential areas would you pick out as being the close ones to look at?
There's lots of potential with it. Certainly, you mentioned solar right at the beginning. That's really exploding in Africa, and we see that potential in other regions as well. We haven't quite found the right partner yet in the Philippines, but we'll be looking for that. Back with the electric vehicles, we're at a point now where we've got over 60 vehicles which are operating, and there's demand for another 400, which is literally people are just lining up for that. And so we'll be financing that. Then it's really going to be a story of expanding to other regions within the country. Boracay is relatively small, but if you're looking at the Manila metropolitan area, you have obviously hundreds of thousands practically of vehicles you could be financing, and then throughout the country as well. So there's really a rollout plan that Gervais Motor Corporation has a strategy to be able to franchise and to grow this business throughout the archipelago of the Philippines into these other municipalities and even to other countries around the world. And so if you're looking at that, you're looking at hundreds and then thousands and potentially even millions of vehicles. And so there'll be needs of financing, as you can imagine, along that whole value chain of really the working capital for the company to purchase and then to assemble the vehicles, and then for the operators, the end users, to purchase the vehicles. So there's enormous potential with that.
Indeed. Now, you were saying obviously impact investing is your thing, but the vehicles, as we discussed, they're great. It's all about being green. It's about not making a mark on the landscape and all these different things. And you were saying the tourists love them as well.
They've actually become hugely popular. I met the mayor when I was in Boracay, and he was saying actually the tourists were requesting these electric vehicles. The traditional vehicles are polluting, but they also make an enormous amount of noise. And so these vehicles are really ideal for it, particularly on an island like that where you have a very fragile environment. They're really ideal, and they're looking actually to make the full circle so that you can have a solar charging for the batteries itself. That's the next step. Right now, that's the charging of the solar of the batteries is coming from the grid, and the next step is to have that be solar charged.
Well, it does seem as though there's a huge amount of traction in this really interesting field. Thank you, George, for coming in and telling us about it today.
Thank you for having me.
No problem. Okay, well, that's all from George and myself for the moment, but make sure you stay tuned to Dukascopy TV. Bye for now.